Bismillahi walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and peace be upon you all. Welcome. The topic I have for today is on lower self-values versus higher self-values. And I touched upon this before. This is a concept from my heart over mind and ego method. I've touched upon some of these lower self and higher self-values, but today I want to go in depth into some of them and how important it is to really be assessing what values you are living from and functioning from. A lot of people don't realize that they are miserable because they're functioning from a lower place. And you can only feel peaceful and aligned when you function from a higher place. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with a lot of I'm sure you've heard these terms before, especially in the new age self-help material out there. They'll say vibrate from a higher vibrations, right? Now, a lot of that is referred to maybe things that don't align with Islam, but think of it this way, right? That you can function from a higher level or from a lower level. There's this understanding that you can function from this higher place where how you show up and how you interact, you feel like it's higher vibrations, higher energy, whatever you want to call it, right? That what you're putting out there is just comes from a higher place. Now, in Islam, of course, what we're talking about is not, people can sometimes that kind of teaching, the new age teaching, a lot of times it's not rooted in tawheed. It's not rooted in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the source of your guidance and your capacity and how you show up. But in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the source. And He has given us this element of life within us. What is this element of life within us? What is it called? What is the element of life that Allah has put within us? The ruh, right? The ruh is the element of life within us that without it, nothing in our being would exist. Meaning that we wouldn't have life without this ruh within us. You remove the ruh from the body cannot exist. Now, what if the body no longer exists? Can the ruh exist? Yes. The ruh is eternal. It transcends this human experience. So first and foremost, the first foundational truth we need to connect to is this ruh comes from a higher place, and it is designed to return to a higher place. This dunya is, by definition, a place that is lower. And subhanAllah, I want you to think about this. Look how beautiful this dunya can be. Look how Allah decorated the earth for us. And then remind yourself that there's a much higher place that we're destined for. Rumi, he says, my soul is from elsewhere and I plan on ending up there. It is always important to remind yourself that you have this powerful element of life within you. And this element of life does not end here. And it is destined for a place that is higher. So anytime you align with its values and the place that it came from, you function from a higher place. You function from this higher self. And anytime you function from your nafs, and I'm talking about nafs al-ammara bisu, the nafs, in my home method, when I say the lower self, I'm referring to nafs al-ammara bisu, the nafs that incites you to evil, that incites you and motivates you to do what does not serve your soul. The nafs, the part of you that wants instant gratification at the expense of what your ruh needs, what your soul needs. So it wants to be gratified over giving the ruh what it needs to thrive. So every body, meaning being, has its designed nutrition. We have a physical body and we have a spiritual body, which is the ruh. Now, the physical body, does it have its own designed nutrition to survive? Absolutely. Water, food. If you give it sand, can it survive on sand? No. Who decided that? You? No, you couldn't have decided that because you're not the creator of your being. So only the creator can design the design. Only the creator can identify the design of his creation. I'm going to give you an example. And I mentioned this in my book when I talk about our design and why it's important to understand our purpose, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, before creating us, already identified our purpose. So, because this is the rule for anything, when you come to create anything, do you know the purpose before creating it or after creating it? Before. So, the example I give in my book is that if somebody, the person who created the pen, did they know the purpose before creating the pen or after creating the pen? Before. Why? Because you have to know the purpose in order to fashion the design of the pen to do what it is designed to do. So I want to create a pen. Why? The purpose has to be identified, to write. So then what comes after that? The pen must be designed in a way that can help it fulfill its purpose, which is to write. So the grip at the end for you to hold the pen, the point, the lead, you identify the design after you identify the purpose. What is our purpose that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran? And I have not created jinn or human except to worship me. Allah has identified your purpose. Now, how do you not think that He did not create you and mold you and design you in a way that fulfills that? So that means that your very design is molded by the Creator Himself to help you fulfill that purpose. And so He gave you this element of life within you, the ruh, that comes from a higher place and is destined for that place, to return to that place. And it has its own values that it craves, that it longs for, it is only at peace when you live by those values. And then you have another part of your design that is more attached to this lower world. So you have your ruh, what I refer to as your higher self, that is attached to the higher place, the akhirah, the unseen, the world that it came from. And then you have your lower self that is attached to this dunya, that is attached to this lower world. And nafs al-ammara bis-su', that wants instant gratification. It wants immediate satisfaction. And oftentimes at the expense of this higher self. So this is the struggle. Do I feed this higher self and align with this higher self, or do I align with this lower self? And here's the formula. You show up to align yourself with the values of this higher facet within you, this element of life within you, you function from a higher place. You experience peace, you experience alignment, you experience grounding, you experience anchoring. Or you could choose to function by aligning yourself with the values of your lower self. Me, myself, and I. Give me instant gratification. All I care about is feeling good. All I care about is getting what I want when I want it. And so there's so many values we can get into, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you what the values of the higher self are. In so many ways, throughout the Quran, throughout the Sunnah, what are the actions that feed the higher self? What is the nourishment that feeds the higher self? So what I meant is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just as He has identified what the nourishment of your physical body is, food and water, He has identified the nourishment of your ruh to thrive in this world as you journey back home. And the nourishment of the ruh is obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is obedience to its creator. Just as the pen cannot function if it's not obedient to its creator. Meaning what? If the pen did not write, is it functionable? Is that even a word? Is it functioning? Okay, if the pen did not write, is it useful to you? When we do not worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we cannot function. We think we can function. We think we are being useful. We think we are, this is what the Quran says, they think they are doing good, but they aren't. And this is the illusion that shaitan gives a lot of people. You don't need that. Stay away. You don't need obedience to Allah. You don't need to obey Allah. You're fine. You're good. You're thriving. You're succeeding. Look at you. You got everything. And that's what Allah does sometimes for people. He gives them the world. He gives them the dunya. And so when things get hard for you, and you remember your need for Allah, know that that test was such a blessing for you. Because through the hardship, through the discomfort, through the test, Allah's reminding you of who you are, which is that you are a servant of God. And your ruh was designed to obey Him, to align with the Creator, meaning what He created it for, which is to worship Him, to center around Him. And everybody worships something. Everybody aligns. Everybody centers around something. If you do not worship the one who is most worthy of you worshiping Him, if you do not center around the one who is most worthy of you centering around Him, trust me, you will worship something else. Something else will be your highest value. And so there's the nourishment of the spiritual body, first and foremost, that we need to be grounding ourselves in. Are we centering around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Are we cultivating that sound tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or are we giving other things, people, wealth, all other desires, putting it at the same place or giving it the same value that only Allah deserves? Are we obeying Allah in the practices, the prescriptions? Allah has given prescriptions, right? So just as the physical body, it needs to eat, it needs to drink. Your body has prescriptions, starting with prayer. Prayer are the anchors of nourishment for the ruh every single day. You disconnect from prayer, you cut the link, the sila, which is exactly what prayer is rooted in. It's linguistically, it's rooted in the word sila, which means link. It is your very link to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's your ruh's lifeline. So this ruh, even though it transcends this human experience, can it die in this world? Spiritually, yes. So yes, it exists, but why do people feel spiritually dead? So you're physically alive, but spiritually you're not. The ruh is so disconnected from the source of its light. So this is what happens when people say, I feel like a zombie. I feel like I'm just going through the motions. The element of life within you has been cut off from the source of its light, the source of its joy, the source of its peace. And by the way, this is the greater body within you. You have your physical body and you have your spiritual body. You could feed your physical body, but if your spiritual body is not fed, this is the most important body. You will be miserable. And a lot of people don't realize this. They treat it the opposite. The spiritual body is the lesser body, the less important body. And the physical body is the most important body. As long as I'm satisfying the physical body constantly, I'm good. No, the spiritual body is actually who you are at your core. That is who you are. Because that's who you will be when your physical body no longer exists. And isn't that such a beautiful thing? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala values you so much that who you are, as being His servant, is not confined or limited to this temporary human experience or this temporary vessel. That He created you to be higher, and He created you for a more valuable world. That's how much Allah values you. If you weren't valuable to Allah, then you would end just when the physical body ends. Why the need to continue? Because He has something greater in store for you. But all you see is this. It's like what Rumi says, I'm going to butcher the quote, but I'm going to paraphrase. You see a drop of water, you want the drop, while Allah has the ocean for you. This is how we function a lot of times. The drop is this dunya. I want this. This is what's going to quench my thirst. While Allah has an entire ocean for you, and you don't see it. All you see is this drop, and what this drop contains, and all that's missing, and all that you think you need to be happy while forgetting what Allah has in store for you. So it's so important. Before I get into lower self values, and which are nafs-driven values versus higher self ruh-driven values, I really want to just connect your heart to this element of life within you. And I want you to ask yourself, have you been functioning more from this higher place, or have you been functioning more from this lower place? If you've been feeling lower, then perhaps you've been, if you've been functioning from a place that doesn't feel at peace or aligned or anchored, and you feel like you're scattered, you feel like you're not nourished, you feel that the light is dimming within you, then perhaps you need to start functioning from the place that you were designed to function from, the place that transcends this human experience. So in my Heart Over Mind and Ego method, I talk about, in addition to the nourishment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for us, through my work I have noticed that there are certain values that feed the ruh, and there are certain values that feed the nafs. There are certain values that are ruh-driven, higher self-driven, and higher self-values, and there are some values that promote the growth of our lower self, the growth of our ego, the growth of our nafs. So the first and foremost, and I won't go in too much detail on this because I covered this one extensively in a previous halaqah, and it's perfectionism. So I'm going to go over the lower self-value and its matching higher self-value, meaning what should I replace this with? So the first lower self-value, the nafs-driven value, is perfectionism, which is what? Believing you always have to be perfect, mistake-free, be void of flaws, and without failures or setbacks in life. What does this lead to? Greater toxic shame. It leads to hopelessness. It leads to anxiety. It leads to distress, inauthenticity. Now, a lot of people actually think that perfectionism is a noble trait. But this is something I've explored extensively, and I found that it actually comes from the nafs. It comes from our lower self. It's this illusion of, I need to match this in order for me to feel worthy. And the second you make a mistake, the nafs is like, this doesn't match the ideal image that I have for us. It has a lot to do with the image you're presenting. So perfectionism has a lot to do with this rigid image that the nafs is attached to and thinks it needs us to maintain for us to be worthy, lovable, accepted, successful. And I'm sure you all have this idea in your mind. And last week we talked about rigidity in thinking, right? You guys remember? And how any time we engage in mental rigidity and really fixate on rigid ways that our life should look like, or, perfectionism is a form of rigidity. It's a form of mental rigidity. So a lot of people engage in perfectionism, and what happens is they have this all or nothing mentality, where they're either showing up when things are perfect, and it could be that their routine is perfect, they've done everything perfectly, or it could be that the environmental conditions are perfect. So everyone's different, right? Some people are like, okay, if I can show up this way perfectly, then I'm good. Other people, it's like, if everything is good outside of me, then this is good, then I can show up. This creates an all or nothing mentality in worship, especially, when it comes to your ibadah. Of course, it creates an all or nothing mentality in all the other areas in your life, but especially when it comes to your ibadah. So in my H.O.M.E method, I say that when you lead from your nafs, you're only going to walk towards Allah when you feel good. You feel good, meaning that, because when things are perfect, does the nafs get a return? Absolutely. No, when things are perfect. Like when things match this perfect image that the nafs has, the nafs is like, this feels good. I'm worthy. I'm good. The second things don't match that perfectly rigid image, the nafs is like, I'm not good anymore. So you walk towards Allah. When the nafs is the lead of you, you walk towards Allah when you feel good. And then when you don't feel good and things don't match up, the rigid idea of the nafs, then you don't walk towards Allah. But when the heart is the lead, which is the center, the center principle of the H.O.M.E method, is that the heart is designed to be the lead. What happens? You walk towards God in all your conditions. You understand that you're always imperfect, walking towards the most perfect. So the higher self-value that we should have instead of perfectionism is, I am always a work in progress. I never arrive at perfection. So this higher self-value of being a work in progress is believing that only Allah is perfect. And you will always be a work in progress on your journey in this world. Believing that perfectionism is an illusion and not a truth, not a reality, and that being sincere in front of Allah with one's intentions and efforts is what's most important. Believing that no good effort, and this is very important when you want to shift now from perfectionism into this flexibility. This is a perfect example actually of what we talked about last week about going from rigidity to going from mental rigidity to mental flexibility. This is a perfect example. Going from perfectionism to being a work in progress, accepting imperfection, focusing on your sincerity, and continuously showing up and walking towards Allah in all your conditions. A part of this higher self-value is believing, really believing, and this is what a lot of people miss. So be present with this. Really believing that no good effort, even if not perfect, is lost in front of Allah. And a lot of people miss this. They really tell themselves that I have to be perfect for Allah to accept my efforts. But this is not true. This leads to, when you have this mentality, you know that Allah doesn't let a person's effort go to waste. What does that mean? No, it does not mean that you only pray 1 rak'ah of Isha and say, okay, Allah is going to accept my Isha prayer. No, okay, because there's a requirement for Isha prayer and it's 4 rak'ahs. What I mean is that you do good and the outcome doesn't match the perfectly rigid idea of what you thought it should look like. What do you say to yourself? Allah sees my efforts. Allah rewards me for my intentions. And nothing is lost in front of Allah. This is so important. In our world today, a lot of people struggle because they don't feel seen. They don't feel like what they do matters. They don't feel appreciated. They don't feel like, that they are seen for what they put forward. They're not witnessed. SubhanAllah. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala name himself as Shaheed? He is the witness to your life. Why did Allah appoint angels on your right and on your left, the noble recorders they are called, to record everything you do? This is how much Allah values you. So not only is He a shaheed and a witnesser of what you do, He has appointed the most noble, not just any angels, the noble recorders to record what you do. That's how valuable you are to Allah. That's how valuable what you do matters to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah also constantly tells us that He is as-Sami'ul Basir. How many people today say, I'm not heard, I'm not seen, I feel so unseen, I feel so unheard? Why does Allah constantly remind you that He is as-Sami'ul Basir? So you always feel that you always know in your heart, I am always seen, I am always heard, not by any creation, but by the Creator Himself, the King of Kings, Rabb al-Alameen. And just a connection to this, a deep connection, not just knowing it here, a deep connection here can shift your entire life. Because you know you're always witnessed. You know you always matter. You know what you do is always valued. And you know your efforts don't go to waste. How many people work in organizations or companies and feel like what I do is never matter, is never, it doesn't matter. How many people are in families or in marriages where they feel like nothing I do matters? But to Allah, you always matter. And to Allah, everything you do matters. And it never goes to waste. It'll always come back to you in some form or another. Wow, it's already 6. Wow, subhanAllah. Okay. And this is in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, as for those who believe and do good deeds, we do not let the reward of anyone who does a good deed go to waste. So, because of time, I didn't get a chance to go through subhanAllah. This probably will require a few lessons. But just for today, I want you to think about, and this is a good continuation of what we talked about last week when it came to mental rigidity. I want you to really think about how perfectionism is holding you back and how you can shift into more flexibility mentally so that your heart can walk towards Allah in all your conditions. Not expecting perfection in order for you to walk towards Allah. And what I mean is this illusion that things need to be perfect externally. By the way, be careful of these tactics. You know those times where you want to go run to pray, and then you're like, wait a minute, hold on. I just noticed this cupboard is not clean and this is not clean and I need to tidy. Be careful of these prerequisites that all of a sudden come up for you before you actually do what you need to do that serve your higher self. So shaitan wants you always delaying what serves your higher self. Why? Because he knows that if you give this ruh what Allah prescribed for it, you'll be unstoppable. You will have access to Allah's light. You'll have access to An-Nur himself. And he is the source of light that fills your being. And we always need a connection and a sila. That's why missing prayer or cutting that link of prayer is so, we don't understand what it does to us. You're literally cutting the link, the very lifeline, the very link that connects you to An-Nur. And I'll say this, in what can be more valuable to us other than light? Light is what guides people, brings them out from darkness, right? And this is actually the example that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives in the Quran when he talks about guiding people. يُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. He brings them out of darkness into light. This is the equivalent of being guided. You cannot afford to ever be cut off from Allah's light. You cannot. Because guess what happens when you're cut off from Allah's light? Everything else becomes shiny. False shininess. SubhanAllah, one day I was wearing this ring that's like, it's not gold. I had a gold ring on, a real gold ring, and then I had this other ring that I had bought from Saudi. They have a lot of like these fake, they look real, but they're not. It was a fake gold ring. But they look so beautiful and they look really shiny. And I remember one person commenting on the ring that was shiny, but it was fake. And thinking that's the one that's, so beautiful. And it made me really think about how, subhanAllah, the fakest things are so shiny in this world. Right? The fakest things are the shiniest. And how this person thought that this one was the real thing. And this is what's happening to so many people. They're attracted to what shines, not what illuminates, not what truly brightens you, not what truly fills you with light. If you think about shine, it doesn't really illuminate. Something shiny, just like it's on the surface. It's just something that gives an outer, what's another word for shine? Yeah, maybe an outer reflection, an outer what? Glimmer? You said, yeah, an outer glimmer. But it actually, from inside, it's not something that's illuminating, right? So when something is shiny, it doesn't mean that it contains actually something valuable. When we say something shiny, we're usually talking about something that's on the surface. But when something illuminates, it illuminates from within. This is what happens when you're cut off from Allah's light, is that you start appreciating things that are fake. And this is what's happening to people's world, to today's world, is that people cut themselves off from an-nur and then they chase shiny things. And that's what shaitan wants. He wants you to think that those are the things that hold illumination for you. And people chase them and chase them and chase them, and they never arrive. So be careful of this. And always remember your heart, your ruh needs a connection to an-nur. And He has given you prescriptions. And if you cut yourself off from these prescriptions, you're cutting yourself off from light. And light is equivalent to guidance. Light is equivalent to truth. Don't we say that truth will light the way? This is not a Muslim, just a Muslim saying. It's a universal saying, right? That people say truth lights the way. We always equate truth with light. Why? Because truth brings light. Truth actually illuminates our understanding. It illuminates, it clarifies. It brings light into our minds, into our being, right? Into our world. Falsehood darkens. And so you have to always understand, Ya Allah, I'm in need of your light. And this is why we make a dua, Ya Rab, Allahumma ij'al fi qalbi nuran, right? Like, oh Allah, place light within my heart, place light on top of me, on my right and on my left. We ask Allah to surround us with light, because you're always in need of an-nur, you're always in need of His light. Brothers are waiting to pray Maghrib, so we will stop here, inshallah, and we will continue with these lower self-values versus higher self-values, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.